All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And if you're just tuning in and haven't seen me before, my name is Lon.TV. I'm a tech YouTuber. And today what we're going to be doing is a live stream covering the landing of the Mars Perseverance rover. And right now that rover is basically inside of that spacecraft, and a lot is going to happen in the coming minutes here. And I thought what I would do before we go too much further is kind of go through what's going to happen. And I have some excerpts of an interview that I did with one of the chief engineers of this, actually the prior vehicle, so that we can see, really what goes into getting this thing on the ground. Now, this launched back in July of 2020. It took it that long to get to Mars, and there's only so many. Basically, every 2 years or so, the planets are in the right place where you can efficiently get yourself to Mars, and that is why we don't have these landings all that often. Their last rover that landed was the Mars Curiosity rover back in 2012. I think there was one other lander since then, but it wasn't a rover. And to get this thing on the ground, it is pretty difficult. So here's the rundown of what's going to happen here. The rover is going to land at 3:55 p.m. Eastern Time, which is about 40 minutes or so away. And so probably around 3:50 or so, I'll shut up and I'll tune into the JPL broadcast so we can get a better observation as to what's going on from the experts actually running this thing. Where it's going to land is in a crater called Jezero Crater, and it's about 18 degrees north latitude, 77 degrees longitude on the surface of Mars. And the reason why they picked that crater is that they think that there was a high probability of water that washed into this basin, and they think they could probably find evidence of microbes if they exist in that crater, and that's why they chose that. So the mission, which we'll talk about in a minute, is to look for signs of life, but also some other things too. The prime mission, as you can see here, is 1 Martian year, about 687 Earth days. But note that these things tend to last a lot longer. So the one that they sent in 2012 is still operating right now. So it is probably going to be operating for at least 5 or 6 years, if not longer. It is powered by plutonium. So this sucker is nuclear, as they'd say in Back to the Future. Pretty cool stuff. It's going to collect 30 samples, which they hope to send back to Earth at some point in a future mission. And one of the key things here is the one-way light time. Take a note of this. So right now, it takes 11 minutes and 22 seconds for light from this planet to reach Mars and vice versa. So that means that the spacecraft behind me here has to do everything autonomously from a program and from some AI that they've programmed into it to find a safe landing spot, because you can't possibly control anything given the delay in how long it takes for a radio signal to reach the planet, 11 minutes and 22 seconds. So it takes a lot of planning and a lot of engineering to get this thing on the ground. And you'll see just how crazy the landing process is here in a minute. Now, the rover weighs 2,260 pounds on Earth. But on Mars, because Mars is a smaller planet with less gravity, it weighs 866 pounds. And take a look at how big it is. It's about the size of a small car or like a golf cart. So this thing is not small, and it therefore requires a lot of really smart planning to get this thing not only into space and have it operate in space for many months, but then to get it on the ground so that it can operate safely on a planet autonomously just through engineering and code. And you can just see how big this is. This video comes from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. One of the cool things about NASA is that all of the footage that they give you to the public is free. So we can use this without any repercussions, although sometimes news organizations claim this footage as their own, which is unfortunate. And I'll say hello to some folks on the live stream in a few minutes here after we get through some of the details here. And you can see some of the work they're doing here to test it. This is the actual flight hardware. So this is the actual rover that you see that's currently inside of the spacecraft on its way to Mars. And they are very careful about contamination. In fact, there's a whole division at NASA that looks at the issue of contamination because they don't want Earth microbes going to Mars if they can avoid it. So everyone's in clean suits, and that's twofold. One, to prevent contamination, but also to prevent objects that could damage the spacecraft in flight, especially metal objects that could short things out. So that's the rover. And then they have a landing device, essentially, that will go over the rover. So the rover is on the left there. And if you look at that thing on the right, that is how the rover will land. So the device on the right is essentially a series of rockets that will lower the rover onto the ground. And they do this through something called the sky crane maneuver, which I'll show you in a minute once we get to that section of my video clips here. But this is when they mated it up with the descent stage there. And this is powered by hydrazine rocket engines. Hydrazine is a hypergolic. I guess it operates in vacuum and in places without oxygen, which is the surface of Mars. And these rocket engines can throttle, so it can adjust the speed as it goes down. And in fact, they use the rocket engines to figure out when the rover actually hits the ground. It's really, really neat how this works. But you can see them putting it all together there. I mean, the complexity, and this is a one-off thing. You know, they've flown this design before. The last rover came down the same way. But this rover is very much new. So, you know, it's something that they have to design from scratch. Pretty cool. And then I think in this video they're doing some testing of demating it, and then they remated it, just to make sure it's going to work correctly. And now let me show you this next one, because this is how it lands. So right now we're here, right? In a second it's going to, or a few minutes, it's going to ditch the solar panels there on the back, and it's going to interface with the atmosphere. And that's a heat shield on the bottom, an ablative heat shield, so it'll burn away to keep the inside safe. And if you were on Mars, that would be what you see right there. But this is where the real crazy stuff happens. So once it gets through all of the heating, and that's the rover tucked inside, and you saw how they put it all together there a second ago. Once it gets through all of that heating, it's going to slow its rotation down, as you can see. And then it's got a hypersonic parachute. I think this is like the biggest hypersonic parachute ever made. And I think they make it in Connecticut here. And then that'll slow it down, but the Martian atmosphere is very thin, so the parachute can't slow it down enough. So what they're going to do when they get as slow as they can get, they ditch the heat shield so that the rover can see the ground. And the reason it needs to see the ground is because it needs to make sure it's not going to land on something. And then, as you can see, they just cut it loose. And you see how it turned away? Because if those rocket engines ignite and it's not pointed away from that back shell, it'll hit it. And then the rocket system will propulsively bring it down to the ground. So it slows down, obviously, much better with the rockets than it does with the parachute. And then while it is getting closer, it is comparing the images that it sees with an orbital map that was taken earlier. And this is where the sky crane maneuver begins. It lowers it to the ground. They cut those things loose, and that flies away and crashes and explodes somewhere, and then the rover's on the ground. And that's how they get it there. And it looks totally insane. Like, how could this possibly work? But it did work once already. And I want to show you some excerpts that I have. Let me cut back to me for 1 second here. I have some excerpts of an interview that I did with the chief engineer. I'm going to pull it up here. The chief engineer who designed this system on the Curiosity rover. I interviewed him back in 2014. If you're watching on Amazon right now, the book that I have selected on the carousel, that book was written by this guy, Rob Manning. And he describes the process of coming to the conclusion that what you just saw was the best way to land one of these huge rovers on Mars. And in this clip, he's going to talk about testing and how you really can't test until you get to the planet. Let's have a listen. The thing that people don't get, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that you don't really test the whole system before it goes, right? There's tests of components and whatever, but you put this thing together, you put your best effort into it, and then what?
Good question. It turns out that, yeah, you're absolutely right. Mars and Earth is so different that we really can't do a systematic entry, descent, landing test. If you remember the Orion test from a week ago, that was a fantastic test. I was so jealous because they can do a full up test of their whole approach and entry, descent, and landing process, and do it safely without the mission being compromised due to a failure. Yet, so they were able to pull it off on Earth, but on Mars, I can't do that without going to Mars. And so Mars, because they're so different. So our first test is the actual landing on Mars. Now, what we do instead, he says, we've got it. We just can't just cross our fingers. But to get our self-confidence, we put computers. We create computer models of all these different pieces. So really have a full-up simulation of our vehicle, including its software, and we put that all together into a simulated Mars environment. So it's a bit like our vehicle becomes alive in the computer, and we wrap it like the Matrix. Right. Wrap it around a simulated Mars environment, and then we count how many times this thing. We run it over and look for cases where it doesn't work, and so that's how we fine tune the software. That's how we fine tune our selection of the landing site. So all these things we put together. Now we tried that first for Pathfinder, and we really since then we've really gone crazy with these simulations, and these simulations have become now we've evolved into these simulations for Curiosity rover. These computer simulations are mind-bogglingly big, run hundreds of thousands, millions of times on these supercomputers. In fact, we rerun them right leading up until landing, the moment of landing. Wow. Here on Earth while it's going on, to make sure that we've tuned everything up just right so it lands safely.
So that's some insight into it, and it's amazing. Again, this was done. This interview was done in 2014, which looks like my interview room was kind of like a hostage studio because it was in the basement here before I finished it. It was when I was first getting started, and I was so grateful that Rob was so generous with his time. And you can check out the full interview. I've got a few more excerpts from this that you might find interesting too. But they couldn't test it at all. They tested all the components, but they couldn't test the system, and it worked flawlessly. And they learned a lot because all of the data from the Curiosity landing in 2012 now carries forward into this system, which is landing very much the same way. And when something works, you run with it. And one of the things he told me was that, because they understood the math and the process, they knew it would work, provided all the systems, worked properly. The physics of it made a lot of sense. And you'll hear him talk about stability in an upcoming clip. I did see a comment here on Amazon from Bigfoot Gorilla about the airbag system. So this I think now is the fourth or fifth rover that they landed on the surface of the planet. So in 1997, we had the little Pathfinder rover, which landed with airbags. So what they did is they had the parachute, they had a rocket assist, but they didn't have the throttled rocket engines. So what they would do is slow it down enough and then get it right above the ground, cut the cord, and then these airbags would inflate and it would just bounce. And that's how they did the Pathfinder. And then they had a pair of rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, that they sent in 2004. And they sent two rovers because they weren't sure if they'd make it. So they wanted to make sure they had some redundancy built in. So those two rovers also landed with airbags. But Curiosity, the last rover, and this one are too big to land with airbags. So that's why they had to run with the system that they're using here. Our next clip here is about the autonomous landing system. So let's pull that up. And again, this is from 2014 with Rob Manning, who was the chief engineer of the landing system on the prior rover.
Right. In fact, the dirty secret is that we didn't even have to be there. But the reason we're there, up until about an hour before landing, it is possible. There are contingencies where we might send commands to the vehicle. and to if something bad looks bad to happen, there are certain options. For example, hitting the reset button on the computer.
Right.
We could do that from Earth. We have to make sure we don't do it too late, because we have to wait for the signal. If we said, oh, hit the reset button, we hit the button, the signals go across the solar system. It takes, in the case of Curiosity's landing day, 13 minutes to get there. So, if you wait too late, and the 7 minutes of entry, descent, landing, the 7 minutes of terror, we called it, will have been over with by the time the reset signal got there. So you have to make sure that if there's a problem, that you do it early enough so it gets there in time to do it. In fact, on Pathfinder, we came this close to hitting the reset button, literally about 25 minutes before landing. It was very terrifying, but we didn't.
And so there you go. So you have no time. And what's interesting is that, as you said at the outset of that clip, you don't even have to really be there in person to land the craft, because it is going to land itself. And I was listening to, so what we're going to be listening to in a few minutes once we get closer to landing time is that we have the raw feed from NASA's JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And what they'll be doing is kind of going through the motions of what the spacecraft is experiencing. They have no control over it. As I mentioned earlier, the light time is so significant. And what's crazy is that when we start getting signals as to the start of the landing process, it will either already be on the ground or a pile of metal somewhere. So it's pretty crazy. Bigfoot Gorilla wants to know, did it use the parachute? Yeah, so all of them have used parachutes to some degree, but again, the atmosphere is so thin that the parachute can't slow you down enough. So you have to use some kind of rocket propulsion to get you to that last leg. And if you look at all the spacecraft that land on Earth, parachutes are fine, right? But on Mars, you don't have a very thick atmosphere. I think it's like 8%. Here's another clip talking about how they stabilize the sky crane maneuver, because when you think about it, like, wouldn't it start swinging wildly? But actually, it's a pretty simple problem, believe it or not, to solve. Have a listen.
This is a pendulum, right?
Right.
And so what's cool about a pendulum is that, this is very much like our rover with a descent stage above it. But a lot of people said, this thing is not stable. How do you control it? Things can get wildly out of control, and this thing can slam sideways into a rock. The wheels would never survive that. And then it dawned on us that the way that we do testing, the way a human being would stop a pendulum is a lot easier than people think. Check this out. How long do you suppose it would take me, if I close my eyes, to stop it from swinging with my eyes closed? Watch this.
Wow.
It's almost instant.
Right.
I have an algorithm in my head.
The muscle memory.
It's not that anyone can do it, and they all know how to do it instantly. And the reason people know how to do it is because what they do is your body automatically feels the force it's being pulled on this way, and then they move their hand to compensate. And so all you have to do to slow down the damping, to damp these motions, is to move in the direction you're being pulled.
Right. So if you have a computer do that, that's it.
Yeah, and it turns out that's a really easy algorithm to write and write in software. And so we trained our descent stage to do that, and the rover to do exactly that. And voila, we were able to make the thing go rock solid straight down.
Isn't that cool? And what's funny is that if you were to do that experiment that he just did, by the way, that's Rob Manning, in case you're just tuning in. I interviewed Rob back in 2014 when he published a book on designing the landing system for these rovers. It's a fascinating interview. And what's amazing, like, with what Rob's skills are here, because he's an engineer that's like a rocket scientist, but he's able to explain how they do things. And yes, rocketry and orbital mechanics, all that stuff is complicated. But there's simplicity to it all, and he's able to kind of cut through that. And the interview was just a ton of fun because you really get an appreciation that these are people, just like you and me, working on this stuff. It's doable. And one of the cool things that you could do is that pendulum experiment yourself. If you grab like a power cord like he showed you, you'll amaze yourself by how quickly you can stabilize it. It's just like a natural thing, and that's what they basically came up with. Visually, it's like, really? that you're just going to lower this thing down on a rocket sled and it's going to stay stabilized. But yeah, it can if you program things properly. The other thing that's pretty cool, and you'll read this in his book, is that they had a hard time trying to figure out when the rover was on the ground. And they were initially going to go with all these high-tech sensors and all this crazy stuff. And they ended up settling on the rocket engines themselves because there was going to be less resistance to, like the rockets will actually throttle down when the rover touches the ground because there's less pull on it, right? And these are throttled rocket engines that are adjusting their propulsion rate based on whatever they programmed it to do. So they could actually figure out that it was on the ground based on the fact that the rocket engines had throttled down, and that's when they cut those cords and it flies away. I want to show you one more thing because this rover has a drone on it. So in addition to all the experiments that we'll talk about in a second that they're going to be doing, there is a little drone that looks like what you'll see here in a second. It actually will detach from the rover and fly, just like one of your DJI drones. Check it out. So it's underneath the drone, and I guess it kind of deposits it and drives away from it. And remember, the atmosphere is thinner, so they designed these carbon fiber propellers that the drone will use. So it drives away a little bit here. And then it's got like a battery that's going to charge from the solar cell on the top of it. And I think the propellers are like 4 feet long. So they're huge propellers. And they need to be because the atmosphere is so thin. And I think they're going to have some microphones on this rover too, so you'll be able to hear some things. And my understanding is too, they're going to have some video coming from way down. And this will be the first flying device. And the rover will take a picture of it, and I think the drone will take a picture of the rover. Why not? And remember, you can't control it, right? So the drone has to autonomously fly itself because of the light time delay. That's the little drone that they'll be flying there. By the way, it looks like on the NASA feed here that the solar panel system there was detached. So it looks like we're getting close to the touching of the atmosphere. So again, touchdown time is at 3:55. So I think things will start happening in about 5 or 10 minutes or so. So until then, let's do a quick little rundown of what they hope to do with this rover, and then I'll shut up and we'll listen to the mission control people. Basically, the mission here is fourfold. One is geology. They want to study the rocks to see what was going on in the region. They're doing some astrobiology where they're going to look for signs of ancient life. And so before they were looking for things that ancient life could eat and live off of. But this was now they're actually going to look for signs that there was life there on the planet before. They're going to do sample caching for future missions, and then they're also going to look at ways that they can produce oxygen on the planet, and that's important for breathing, obviously. But also they want to produce oxygen for rocket fuel so that you can, if you get there and you want to go home, you got to launch yourself, and it's kind of, it's a bad idea to bring all the fuel with you because it's heavy. So if you can produce the fuel on the surface of Mars, you're going to be in much better shape there. So there you go. All right, let's tune in and see if we can hear what's going on here.
Spin from the cruise 2 revolutions per minute down to 0, and then we'll turn to its desired orientation from entry. It will separate the 2 balance masses that has kept it balanced during all of cruise. This will allow the entry capsule to have lift when it enters the atmosphere. We have confirmation that the spacecraft has turned.
And by the way, that audio breaking up is from their end, not mine.
Altitude. We're about 7.5 minutes from entry interface.
Okay, so about 7 minutes before it hits the surface of the atmosphere. So why don't we take some questions here while we wait. And Frank Cromer on the Amazon chat was wondering, is this a drone footage or a drone simulation, or was it a simulation or a test? This was, oh, I got 2 of me up here. That's not good. That was a test. And I think my other computer here is a little bit behind. Let me refresh the thing. By the way, if you're looking for this, if you go to eyes.nasa.gov, you can see this for yourself. And that was a test. And actually, I think there was a YouTuber that did a video on the design of that helicopter system. So you definitely want to check that out. It's pretty cool. Bigfoot Gorilla saying, because it has thinner air, does the drone use more power, has a more power to weight ratio? Yeah, so that's the other thing, is that Mars's gravity is less. So the drone is lighter, but the air is thinner. So it's all in the math. And I wish I was smarter to answer that question properly. This is the feed coming from NASA. Their graphics are more up to date versus what mine is here. David Rue has a great point here about the bravo to the unsung heroes behind the CGI. Yeah, they did some amazing work on the graphics for communicating things out to the public. And by the way, that is another objective of what they're doing with this is public engagement. You know, NASA is a public agency, so if the public is not engaged and interested, they're not going to push Congress for more funding, right? So that's part of the deal here. Brenry says this is more fun than watching reviews of Amazon laptops. Yeah, I got another one coming up, but not right now. Good stuff. And I do have I actually have 2 drones, by the way, so I'll have to see how those work. David, I think Mars is bigger than the Moon, but because the gravity on the Moon is less than Mars, because Mars is the Moon is smaller than Mars. I don't know the exact sizes, but Mars is definitely larger than the Moon. Yeah, and the CGI has been tremendously improved. They've been doing these really high-end CGI animations for, I think, as far back as 2004 when the pair of rovers landed. Spirit and Opportunity, they did some awesome, awesome images of that. There was a question about and Joel corrected himself, gunked up, as far as the dust might impact that helicopter. And I think it probably will after a while. I'm not sure how long they'll be able to operate it for. And I think they only get about 90 seconds or so of flight per charge. And I'm not sure how it will follow the rover as it moves, because these rovers can go for miles. They don't move very fast, but they can go a long way over time. And that is, my guess is they're going to test the drone out a bit and then, probably leave it wherever it lands. So we'll have to see what goes on there. John says this live is actually interesting. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. I like to do things a little differently, and I think this is the kind of stuff that works on Amazon too, because you can find related products. And that book that I've got recommended is a great way to learn about everything you're seeing today, because he details the process. This whole thing began with a crazy idea of, why don't we land it in the sky crane maneuver. I'll show it to you again in case you're tuning in late. Here, let's go back to right about here. So, for a while it's kind of the traditional thing, and then all of a sudden you're dropping this thing off the back shell, and you're just hoping that it all works. But a lot of testing and engineering and science and math all go into it. And watch what they do. They're just going to lower it right down. And this became, it starts off as a crazy idea. Wouldn't it be great if? And suddenly it makes sense, right? Like this was the best solution. And it came out, if you want, back to the excerpt of the interview clip that we had, it's actually a simple algorithm to solve to keep the rover stable. And it already worked once. They know this works, as crazy as it looks. And by the way, it is powered by plutonium, which is crazy. So it is good stuff. Andrew is here. Hello, Andrew Mark David. Glad you're enjoying the stream. And Mark Dell says, I'm producing the heck out of this. Part of it is I had that interview from 2014, and it was such a good interview. Rob was such a good guest to interview because you could just prompt him with a simple question, and he doesn't talk with unnecessary detail. You got to watch it. It was really good. Mark on the Amazon chat says, I love that one of the related items is Kerbal, the Kerbal Space Program app, because that's a really fun. It's a very hard game. But Kerbal Space Program is a great way to experience everything that you see here, because you have to design spacecraft that can go up into space and then land back down again, and all the orbital mechanics that go into it. It's a great game to play around with. So it is a lot of fun. All right, let's take a listen to NASA, see what's going on. And this gentleman here, I forget his name, but he's been working on these landings for a long, long time. You'll see him.
We are 1 minute from entry interface.
Here we go. All right, let's tune in. And everyone in this room has worked many years on what you're about to see here. And usually the room is much more full.
In receive mode.
We have confirmation that the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter is now relaying data from Perseverance. We're about 30 seconds from entry interface. Perseverance is going about 5.2 kilometers per second and is about 190 kilometers altitude above the surface of Mars.
Confirm your jet data flow.
And just to fill in real quick what she just talked about is that
seconds from
MQSW on.
There is a orbiter above the rover right now that is relaying data, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. So they're using essentially a satellite that we've had in orbit around Mars to make this all work. And we're back to the NASA feed here. I'm glad you're all enjoying the stream. Okay, and we've hit entry.
We have confirmation of entry interface. Perseverance is currently going 5.3 kilometers per second at an altitude of about 120 kilometers from the surface of Mars. The spacecraft is now waiting until it begins feeling the atmosphere of Mars to slow it down. Once there is enough atmosphere, it will start controlling its path to the landing target.
Doppler indicates entry into the atmosphere.
Navigation is also confirming that we can see a little bit of that slowdown of the atmosphere on the Perseverance entry capsule. Our current velocity is about 5.36 kilometers per second and an altitude of about 67 kilometers from the surface.
We are probably seeing MRO plasma blackout at this point.
And that was the plasma from the entry into the atmosphere is knocking out the radio signal. It happens with spacecraft on Earth. Now remember, everything we're seeing here has already happened because of the light delay. Isn't that crazy?
Possibly indicate reversal, bank reversal.
We have indications that Perseverance is now performing bank reversals in the atmosphere. These are the steps in order to control its
Max diesel,
distance
10 Gs.
to the landing target. Perseverance has just passed through the point of maximum deceleration and has indicated that it felt approximately 10 Earth Gs of deceleration.
MRO has lock again.
Doppler indicated reversal.
Bank 2 complete.
We saw a small outage of the UHF telemetry from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter during that peak heating phase, likely caused by the plasma blackouts. Perseverance is still continuing to perform bank reversals in the atmosphere to control its distance to the landing target.
Possibly indicate reversal.
End of range control, range minus 1.9 kilometers, cross range minus 2.4 kilometers.
Perseverance is going about 1 kilometers per second at an altitude of about 16 kilometers from the surface of Mars. We have entered heading alignment, which means Perseverance is no longer trying to control the distance to Mars, to the target on Mars, but instead is flying straight to the target.
You know what's remarkable about all this too? Is that they can pinpoint exactly where on the planet they're going to land this thing. There's no GPS on Mars, right? There's no GPS satellites. We have things overhead, but the timing of all of this is just remarkable.
Our current velocity is about 550 meters per second at an altitude of about 15 kilometers from the surface.
And most of what they'll get back are pings.
MRO's reporting good telemetry lock.
We are coming upon the
start.
We are starting the straighten up and fly right maneuver,
UVMD jettison.
where the spacecraft will jettison the entry balance masses in preparation for parachute deploy and to roll over to give the radar a better look at the ground.
Doppler indicates chute deploy.
All right, the parachute's deployed.
The navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed, and we are seeing significant deceleration in the velocity. Our current velocity is 440 meters per second at an altitude of about 12 kilometers from the surface of Mars.
And there it goes. Granted, this is just obviously a computer-generated
Heat shield set.
thing.
Perseverance has now slowed to subsonic speeds, and the heat shield has been separated. This allows both the radar and the cameras to get their first look at the surface. Current velocity is 145 meters per second at an altitude of about 9.5 kilometers above the surface.
Nav filter converge. Velocity solution 3.3 meters per second. Altitude 7.4 kilometers.
Now has radar lock on the ground. Current velocity is about 100 meters per second, 6.6 kilometers above the surface of Mars. Perseverance is continuing to descend on the parachute. We are coming up on the initialization of terrain relative navigation and subsequently the priming of the landing engines. Our current velocity is about 90 meters per second at an altitude of 4.2 kilometers.
It's getting close. It's getting
OVF
close.
valid.
We have confirmation that the lander vision system has produced a valid solution and part of terrain relative navigation.
Priming.
And this is a new
nominal.
feature. So before they weren't doing
priming
that.
of the landing
This part.
engines.
Back shell set.
Velocity is 83 meters per second at about 2.6 kilometers from the surface of Mars. We have
And now it's on
confirmation that the
rockets.
back shell has separated. We are currently performing the divert maneuver. Current velocity is about 75 meters per second at an altitude of about 1 kilometer off the surface of Mars.
TRN safety Bravo.
We have completed our terrain relative navigation. Current speed is about 30 meters per second, altitude of about 300 meters off the surface of Mars.
SDS level
Constant velocity
104.
accordion. Constant velocity accordion, altitude air.
We have started our constant velocity accordion, which means we are conducting the sky crane, about to conduct the sky crane maneuver.
We've lost direct-to-Earth tones.
Throttle down.
Sky crane maneuver has started.
All right, this is the last spot right here.
About 20 meters.
Tango
off the
Delta.
surface.
And I think that means touchdown. We'll see how
Nominal.
they react here. Yep. And once they start jumping up and down, we know we're
Getting
good.
signals from MRO.
Remue stable.
UHF is good.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance
There it goes. They did it again.
on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the signs of past life.
Now, I'm not sure, first of all, wow, right? I mean, you saw everything that just happened. Let me play back what just happened so you can get a
At this
feel
point,
for
the
that.
descent stage has flown away to a safe distance. Perseverance is continuing to transmit
So,
direct through Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter to Earth.
so here, let me play this back for you so you can see exactly what just happened. So this is what just occurred. And granted, this all happened 11 minutes ago, but we just found out now because of the light delay. It takes 11 minutes for the light to get to us. So that was when they lost signal because of the plasma from entering the
No
atmosphere.
reports. They're still getting telemetry from the lander.
And that was the spot
All right,
in
all
which
stations.
it regained its signal, and then the
Touchdown confirmed. We're
parachute
gonna wait for the
extended.
images.
And then, here, I'll get myself out of the way here. It descended. It's pretty amazing that this all works, all autonomously. And this is the second time they've done this with this design. And it's iterative, right? So they learn each landing what works and what doesn't to make the next one better and safer. They drop that heat shield away. And then they drop the rover out. Talk about a leap of faith. Rockets come up. They divert away from the back shell there. And then they get their landing position figured out.
OL1, you have what you need?
And then they lower it down with the sky crane
what I
maneuver,
need.
which
Flight, we have seen
we
the
saw a
completion of
second ago.
EDL 3000.
Copy.
Copy activity. That is as expected.
Now, if this wasn't a pandemic, they'd be hugging and high-fiving,
MRO
unfortunately.
is still seeing a strong signal from the
And
lander.
there you go. That's what just happened. All of that just occurred. And they
Flight,
still have
this
a
is
strong signal.
OL3.
Now
I
that
am ready to share.
we may get some images here, too.
OL3, you
Let's
are
see.
go.
Because the first thing it does is it takes pictures of where it landed.
For those on M,
All stations stand by for the images.
Looks like they got a picture. I think they got a picture. Let's see. Yep, there's your, your first image. A little dusty, and you'll start seeing them pop up on the screen here as they get them in. That's great, though. It came in that quickly.
OL3. I have the target point on the map when you are ready.
We are ready, OL3. Go for it.
And these landings are getting much more precise now, also. I wish they'd cut to a shot of the image to get us a better look at it, but we'll have to wait and see here.
Flight, I'll be moving in, showing you the safe zone that we've landed in.
There you go. That's your first image. A little dusty. The dust gets kicked up from everything that just happened. And that image got transmitted through the orbiter that's overhead. So they'll probably get like a bunch of early images, and then they'll have to wait for the next pass. And later tonight or tomorrow,
TRN.
we may get some video of the whole landing process, because my understanding
Can we
is they
get
were...
the cliff image, OL?
Here, I'll turn this down a little bit. My understanding is that they have a video camera of some kind.
Activity, this is OL. Can you repeat that request on M20 EDLF?
on the...
Oh, well, can we get the other image? Should show the cliff.
Oh, it's the second image. Let's see.
I'm sorry. Say what image again? I'm not understanding.
Flight OL3.
OL3.
You can see we've landed about 35 meters from the nearest rocks that we could identify from orbit by their shadows.
Copy OL3. PRN in action.
Yep.
And
Take that, Desero. Woo!
What they're saying there is that their autonomous landing system was able to avoid some of the boulders they were worried about from that they had seen from orbit.
Copy OL3. I'm sure that you have seen them all and you recognize them all. So.
And now the more high-resolution cameras haven't yet been extended. So once they get it all down and safe, they'll start kicking things up. But these are the first images.
Electra still in lock with the lander.
Flight, we have seen the transition to surface. EDL is done.
Woo!
All right, so it looks like they have declared it complete.
Transition to surface.
Now, the...
All stations are...
So what we should see, I think probably tonight, and we'll have to keep an eye on this, there should be a video from the rocket stage of the actual landing itself. They were taking one. It's going to take a while for that data to get back to us so we can actually see it. The data rate, I looked this up earlier, the data rate back from Mars is 2 megabits per second through the orbiting satellites. So the rover will transmit to a satellite, one of the Martian satellites that we have in orbit around there, and then it in turn beams the data back at a data rate of about 2 megabits per second.
We have transitioned to surface as reported downstairs. If you're part of that story to the surface team.
So, for example, my brother's DSL up in Vermont is half the speed of what it is the bandwidth to Mars back and forth. Think about that for a minute. So, but this was fun. I'm glad you all enjoyed this. We'll take a couple of questions and comments. And I see some people need to be nice to each other in the chat here. And yeah, you know, they have lost landers before. So they had a successful landing in 1997. They had another lander they tried to get down in 99 that failed. And my understanding was, I think with that one, the one that failed, they had some mismatch of the metric to the imperial system on the computer system, and that's what led to the crash of that one. This one, you know, is now kind of a flight-proven design. It's very similar to the platform they used in 2012 for the Curiosity rover. And the NASA websites have, I mean, you will spend days going through all of the stuff that you can go through. Pretty much every raw image that comes down from that rover, you can access. And you know, not all of them are going to be in color because they have to process the color. So these are actually black and white camera sensors, but they put filters in front of the lens to get the color. So you can see every image that gets beamed down. It's just there for the viewing on their raw image site. It's pretty crazy. Smoke Monster wants to know the specs of the camera. I believe I can look this up. I had some specifications somewhere. Let's take a look, because actually there's a lot of cameras on this thing. Let me look it up real quick here. Let me pull up the rover itself. And I think they've got, let's take a look here. Let me look it up on the Google here. Perseverance cameras is what we're looking for. And yeah, so here, let me pull this up for you so you can get a feel for this. So check this out. There are 23 cameras, 9 engineering cameras, 7 science cameras, and then 7 EDL, entry, descent, and landing cameras. That's why we're going to see a lot more of the landing process this time once the data gets uploaded. And that the satellite, the reconnaissance orbiter that was communicating with the rover, we should be able to get a picture back of its parachute from orbit They've done that before also. So I'm just looking through here. New cameras for landing. Added several cameras and a microphone to document the entry, descent, and landing in even greater detail. The cameras capture full-color video throughout the vehicle's final descent to the Martian surface. Some of what the cameras see all on the way down will help mission planners decide the rover's first drives. These new, let's see what they've got. Oh yeah, because they got one looking up at the parachute. They had one looking down on the rover itself. Oh, this is going to be cool. Yeah, there's going to be some cool imagery and video. Wow, so they're going to have video of the parachute opening if the data gets back. It's going to take a while for that data to get transmitted. Remember, it's at 2 megabits per second. It's probably not going to be HD video, but... And you can see some of the other cameras that they've got.
Can we go ahead and get handoff ready to go for our final Monte Carlo?
And here is the, so it's a 20, I think these are the engineering cameras, 20 megapixels. Let me see if these are all the EDL cameras. Okay, so the hazard avoidance camera, and then they have a sample collection camera. And then the mass cam, I think, is the big one. Let's see if there's some specs on that one. Doesn't look like it. Yeah, so that's where you get the 3D images. And they've been running 3D cameras for a while now, so there's some really cool stuff there. And there's some great things in VR that you can do. I know Smoke Monster is a big VR fan. One of the Steam environments is on the surface of Mars, and they have it all. They have it all like mapped out, so you can actually stand next to the rover and get a real feel for how big it is. It's really cool in VR. You should check it out. All right. And Londog says, I guess microphones, here, I'll pull up his comment here. Let's pull it up real quick.
I confirmed that OD-137 is the final DoD.
Yeah, you will hear sound on Mars. It won't sound the same. You'll hear the wind on Mars because that you'll get some sound. It's going to sound different. And of course, it's hard to know what things are supposed to sound like because all you're going to hear is motors and that sort of thing. It's pretty cool.
Indeed,
a lot of elbow and fist bumps there.
You wanted to cancel that last Monte Carlo before we start this one? Or if I should get HBC on it?
Yeah, so it looks like they made it there. So yeah, it's going to be a while, I think, before some of the other images come down. So we'll have to wait for that. But another successful landing on Mars. Pretty cool. They make it look easy. It's not easy at all. But you think about it, like when you look at that landing procedure, it just looks nuts, right? Like, you know, it looks normal, like what you normally expect for a landing on another planet, I guess. But once you get to this part where, you know, you just ditch your parachute, right? There it goes, ditches the parachute, goes down on rockets, and then you're lowering stuff down. Now the Vikings the first Martian landers back in the 70s did land on rockets like this, but they did not do the sky crane maneuver because the Vikings basically came down and just stayed put. And the sky crane maneuver is the new one. One of the things that Rob Manning told me in the interview was that they did not have throttled hydrazine motors available when they first started these new Mars missions back in the late 90s. You know, they kind of lost the skill, right? They had to redesign those throttled rocket engines. So they got them ready in time for the Curiosity mission. But that's how they come down, and that's what just happened. Pretty amazing stuff. All right. Yeah, so be on the lookout, folks. We're going to see some video from the landing sequence. I'm really excited to see that. You're going to see a parachute, if it all comes together, because all that video that was taken, I guess the camera on, yeah, so I think some of the cameras that took the video were on that back shell that separated. So they're going to have, there's got to be some way to, or must have been, some transmission of that video to the rover itself, because the rover is what has the ability to transmit. So if all that worked, then we're going to have a lot of cool images and video of the landing process, because we've never seen any of that before. We've seen still images that they animated, but we've never actually seen video. I don't think we've ever seen video from Mars at all, so this is kind of a new thing. So all the advancements in digital imagery should really help. So yeah, we're all down there, and we're in good shape here. Good stuff. Chanfley98, thank you for the super chat. May the Schwartz be with me. One of my favorite movies. So I'm just like sticking around here to see if they're going to have any other images come down, but I don't think so. We'll have to see what happens here. I got a couple of more comments on the Amazon chat from Frank Cromer. Please consider producing a stream of some of the landing video. Yeah, I will do something with it. I think I'll maybe work it into my weekly wrap-up video or something.
Okay, all stations.
All right, they're saying something here. Hang on. Everyone get back to work. We got a Mars mission to do here. Come on now. Let's see what they're going to say. They're going to get everybody back to their seats.
All stations. Congratulations, but believe it or not, we have a job to do now.
Yeah, work to do.
OL1, TAD1.
Go TAD1.
Are we ready to look at the handoff?
Surface flight, this is flight.
Yes, please.
Should I go ahead and just share it in the WebEx that we're working now?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, flight.
Just want
TAD1,
to
do we have
confirm
your
that
eyes?
your team is ready to receive Perseverance.
I am paying attention.
Copy.
We are ready to receive Perseverance.
Okay,
Are you ready for
the new one is on the left.
Not yet.
The 21 is on the right.
I guess it looks like they're adding Perseverance to their list of stuff. So there was a question, though, about what's currently at Mars and operating. So here's what is currently there that's working. The Mars InSight lander, which has a sensor for monitoring the earthquakes and geology. That one landed in 2018, and it's still operating. Although they had to put it into kind of a low-powered mode because the solar panels on it got really dusty. So it's not able to charge its batteries as efficiently. That one is not nuclear-powered, it's solar-powered. So that one is there. They have the MAVEN, which arrived in 2014 in orbit, still there. The MRO, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, that's been there since 2006, that was what was relaying data just now. That one's still operating there. Curiosity, which is the rover that landed in 2012, on August 6, 2012, that one is still operating thanks to its plutonium engine or energy generator. Mars Express is still operating. That arrived in 2003. And Mars Odyssey is still there operating as well. And these are just the U.S. Satellites. So I believe the Chinese just put one in orbit the other day. I think India's got something. And I know the UAE, I think, did as well. So there's a lot of human activity on Mars. And all of these things tend to arrive around the same time because you have that 2-year window where you can get things to Mars, right? So you can't just launch whenever you want. You've got to have all the planets in the right place. And that's what got that stuff going there. Yeah, Marsquakes, I think, is what they probably called that. All right. And here's a great comment from Anthony Albee. This is like exactly why I wanted to do these streams because, you know, I'm so interested in space, as you all know. And it's not a big, you know, money maker for the channel, obviously, because there's a lot of people that do space better than I do. But one of the things that I've kind of found with doing these kinds of things is that there's not a lot of people talking to, you know, making this make sense for people that aren't into aerospace. You know, I'm into it, but I'm not like a, you know, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, let's put it that way. So I really like to find a way to engage people in a less technical way with this stuff, at least as far as all the science is involved with it. But as Dom says here, Mars is populated entirely by robots, for sure. And yeah, I'm a space nerd, but I'm not like as much of a space nerd, and I'm not being critical of these folks. There's a lot of great content creators on this channel, on YouTube and other places that do a great job covering this stuff. And what I found is that there's There's a lot of people that are really into this who talk to others who are really into space and get all the details. And I'm more of a generalist for everything that I do. So I've been trying to find an audience for this generalized space content for a while. So that's why I like to do these streams, to see if I get any traffic from them. Stephen Mill, thanks for the excellent commentary. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, this was fun. I had some fun putting this together also, because I use vMix, and I had that interview, which I hope you all check out, back from 2014. That was a lot of fun to do, and it really goes into detail with Rob Manning, who was the engineer behind the Curiosity rover, how all this stuff works. And he does it in a way that's just so understandable and down to earth, and I hope you watch it, because it got so few views, because my channel was small at the time. And I really enjoyed talking with him. I emailed him this morning just to wish him luck, and he said thanks. So it was cool to see that. But I'm glad you all enjoyed this. Yeah, this would have been something I would have watched anyhow. So why not involve all of you, right? So that's why I like to do this kind of stuff. So that is it. It's on the ground. We got to wait now for all the data to come back, because again, we're going to have some awesome imagery, and maybe I'll do something on Monday for the wrap-up video with the videos that come back. Hopefully they'll be back by the time we do it on Monday. There's a lot of data that they have to cram into a 2 megabit connection, and there's limited time windows also, because they have to wait for the orbiter to be overhead before the rover can offload its data. So it stores it locally. It's kind of a store and forward thing, right? So the rover collects data. When the orbiter passes over, it shoots it to the orbiter stores and then forwards it back to Earth, right? So you've got a lot of process, and I'm sure that they have to prioritize what data comes back first. So I would imagine, all these EDL videos and stuff are probably not as important as getting a lay of the land and all the other things that go into getting the rover ready for operations. And there's still a lot that it has to do. So the mast has to come up. They've got to get all the stuff unfolded. So there's a lot to this mission. The landing is the hard part, but there's a lot more that they have to get done in the next couple of days here. So that's that. Hot Sauce and Video Games is here. Hope I didn't miss the good stuff. Yeah, you missed the whole thing. It actually is on the ground and it landed. So we're in good shape. Awesome stuff. And Jorge Martinez, thank you for the follow on Amazon. And if you're watching me on Amazon, please give a follow. I usually cover tech products, but I love space stuff. So whenever one of these space things happens, I like to do that. Luther Gaylord's asking, is the rover on the other side of the planet compared to the previous missions? Let's take a look. I think I can tell you, I can answer that question. Let's take a look at the NASA site here. Let's go to NASA Eyes. I think I can look it up on here. Let's take a look and see. And so the question is, where is it related to the other one? So let's go, this is the NASA Eyes website here. So why don't we zoom in on it here and see, and then we're going to wrap things up, because I got to get some videos edited. I still got my usual work to do here. So let's go, oops, I'm hitting the wrong zoom. Okay, I can zoom that way. So let's go to Mars, and we'll take a look and see where everything is. Can I double click on Mars? Yeah, there we go. Okay, there's Mars. All right, so I think their site is like a little, I don't think they usually get this much traffic on this site. So let's see if I can find where Curiosity is. All right, so Mars 2020 is here, which is what just landed. And I think MSL is the other one. So this is where MSL is, which is Curiosity. And this is where the new rover is. So they're a pretty good ways apart. And then you can see what's orbiting also. So all of these, this is where the MRO is right now. So you can see that you've got to wait for these things to get overhead before they can transmit data. Really cool stuff. Well, folks, this was fun, wasn't it? I really enjoyed sharing this experience with all of you. And I'm going to make this video public right after I finish this up, so you can check that out. This is our chat window as it's coming through here. Let me put the NASA images back on. So you can watch all the JPL stuff, and it's not going to be as exciting as what just happened until the images start coming down. But definitely check it out. and we'll see what's going on here. Aaron Johnson wants to know, is this Rover slightly improved? Yeah, there's better camera systems. It's doing some different things. It's actually looking for signs of life versus looking for things that could support life. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, check it all out. All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we will do this again. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this. It was fun to put together too. So if you missed the beginning, rewind, because we've got a lot of cool content kind of explaining the whole process of landing on Mars that I think you might find of interest. So yeah, it's going to do it for now, but I will be back again very soon with more live streams, and thank you all for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Now I got my thing up here. Now we're going bye-bye. Bye-bye. And I'm still on the screen. Why am I still here? Where am I going? Ah!